In 2004, Bad Religion released the song Los Angeles is Burning. The song has references to Orwell's 1984, but let's be honest, we all know that deep down what they were really singing about was 1997's Volcano, because that movie is not that bad. Welcome one and all to It's Not That Bad, the podcast that looks for A grades in B movies. And I am really psyched because I have a confession to make. I love a good disaster film, and we haven't had a chance to cover too many of them on the show so far, but today is the day because we are talking about 1997's Volcano. And here to join me to go down this lava-filled road is Sean from the Review It Yourself podcast. Sean, welcome to the show. How are you doing, man?
Yeah, can't complain. I'm doing pretty well. Thank you for having me on.
Now, before we get into this movie and why you chose this film, for those of you who haven't had a chance to listen to it, I got to appear on the Defend It Yourself part of your show, talking about the pirate movie. But for those who haven't listened to the Review It Yourself podcast yet, please let our listeners know what it's all about.
Yeah, thank you. It was a pleasure having you on, and I really enjoyed that film. You know, I did. There wasn't much defending going on that one. Yeah, I'm Sean from the Review It Yourself. Well, it's just called Review It Yourself. I had to add the podcast, just so people find it. But yeah, I'm Sean from Review It Yourself. My podcast is basically a film, TV, documentary review podcast. It's me joined by various guests. I have a lot of regulars that I bring back, other podcasters mainly, sometimes members of my family or friends. So it's all good fun. Basically, you come on and you review a film, and it's like a natural start. It's just a conversation. It's like you've just dropped into your friend's conversation. There's very little. There's no music. There's nothing like that. It's just a conversation, and hopefully, it's a good laugh and it's entertaining. We've also got more side series than you can throw a stick at, or damn with lava, I suppose. We've got Defend It Yourself, which is where other podcasters or anybody who wants to comes on and defends their favorite film, as you did with the pirate movie. Also, there's other side series as well. So yeah, there's plenty out there, and I do enjoy it. So yeah, go over and have a listen. Hopefully you enjoy it.
And it was a ton of fun being on the show. So thank you for having me on there. And if you haven't had a chance to listen to Review It Yourself and any of the side shows, be sure to find them wherever you get your podcasts. Great listen. But now we're talking about 1997's Volcano. And this was your pick. And I'm not going to lie, I squealed a little bit, that happy squeal when you mentioned it. But why did you suggest 1997's Volcano?
Well, it's just one of those films that, I feel it's been forgotten. Like people will, if you say Dante's Peak, most people will remember that. Brosnan. Linda Hamilton in one of her few. She didn't seem to do many films, but that's a good one of hers. And it seems to have been forgotten. Volcano. I've just always enjoyed it. I did an episode of my podcast with Bill from Bill Reads Bad Reviews. Shout out to Bill, bless him. And we just had so much fun talking about it. And I thought, and you gave me a little bit of a list, and I was like, I want to talk about Volcano again. I will happily talk about that film. I love it for what it is. I have a real soft spot for disaster films. Like, one of my go-to put it on and enjoy it films, whatever mood I'm in, is Roland Emmerich's 2012. Love that film. I love The Day After Tomorrow. I love Independence Day. I love those kind of films where things just get destroyed. Like, even like Independence Day Resurgence, which, isn't that bad. Give it a bit of a go. But I have a real thing for those kind of disaster films because I just think they're great. And yeah, I thought I've got to do that one. It wasn't so much a choice as it has to be that one.
I'll admit, one of the first disaster movies I remember actually watching was the classic Earthquake, and it was so much fun because you're right. Like, when you watch a disaster film, and you mentioned some of my favorites there with like The Day After Tomorrow, absolutely love that one. yeah, there's so much going on, and a lot of it depends on what they focus on. Dante's Peak, yes, it was actually really, really good. There's one sticking point in that film, and if we ever do cover that film, I have one sticking point for that film, but that's for a later episode. But we're talking about this one. We're talking about Volcano. But before we do, it is time to take this Los Angeles-based disaster film and trailerize it.
We've seen Los Angeles deal with earthquakes, tidal waves, and mega sharks. Now the City of Angels will deal with the hellish nightmare from the depths below in Volcano. Tommy Lee Jones will have to rally all the resources LA has to offer to stop a lava flow from destroying La La Land. But considering that the cultural capital of California is also home to gridlock, Scientology, and the Kardashians, he might want to rethink saving the day. And before you say anything, yes, we know the volcanoes in Los Angeles are impossible. It's a movie. Get over it. Tommy Lee Jones stars in the second Volcano film of 1997, Volcano. Rated PG-13 from Pyrotechnic Geology.
It actually is the second 1997 Volcano film because Dante's Peak came out in February of that year. Volcano came out after it. It's kind of like the year when we had
Armageddon and
Deep Impact. Yeah.
The year after, I believe.
Yeah. And it's the same year. Also, keep in mind, too, also released in 1997 was Tidal Wave, where Los Angeles got basically hit with this giant tsunami that LA didn't have a good year in 1997, apparently.
No, a lot of people wanted rid of it by the sounds of it.
It's like this stretch of things where you had, like, when Independence Day came out, you also had, like, Godzilla destroying New York in that film. So basically, for a while, New York was the epicenter of disaster films. And then it moved over to LA. Keep in mind, too, you also have, like, Battle Los Angeles as well, which
I was about to mention. I love that film. I was about to mention
so good. That. Yeah.
Like, it's such an underrated little gem, isn't it?
Yeah. And the thing is, like, when you see it, it's like, okay, this looks kind of Chez when you watch the trailer. And then you watch the film, like, no, this is good. This is really good.
It's the tone. It's like a serious tone, isn't it? Like, you think it's going to be just complete cheese fest.
Mm-hmm.
But you watch it and you go, hang on, this is like somebody's gone, right. Saving Private Ryan meets kind of like Independence Day, and you go, that's not going to work. And they go, oh, no, it will. It will.
Yeah.
And you kind of, okay, I'm with you. It's like The Car. Have you ever seen The Car?
No, I don't think I have.
Oh, have you not? Oh, my God. Right. I'll tell you what. You can come back on my podcast and we'll review The Car. The Car is, I don't know how to describe it. Just don't read anything about it. Just go watch it because it's horrendous, but it's also unbelievable. I don't know how that mixes together, but it's got Aaron Eckhart, who plays Two-Face and who's in Battle Los Angeles. He's also in it. Oh, it's a great film. It's terrible, but it's good.
Sign me up. I'm always down for that. But yeah, the thing with Battle Los Angeles is it kind of hit that perfect middle ground between Deep Impact and Armageddon. Like, Armageddon was just a straight up popcorn flick, and Deep Impact took a more serious human story look at an asteroid hitting. Battle Los Angeles kind of found like that happy middle ground that had a little bit of this and a little bit of that and put it together to make a really, really good movie.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's. I've always enjoyed the Deep Impact for the way it goes about things. It shows the impact that you would have on the society. Of being told, yeah, you do realize that probably most of you are going to die. And I enjoyed. I enjoyed about it. It's a bit dark, but yeah. And then you get obviously on the other side of it, just the total cheese fest that is Armageddon, which I showed my friend who'd never seen it on the first podcast I ever did. Which didn't last very long, and he didn't like it, and he fell asleep watching it, and I've never been so disappointed in a friend.
It's occasionally there are movies out there that are the litmus test, and it's like, if you like this, you're my people, and if you don't like this, then we have to question everything about this friendship going forward.
Yeah, I was and he'd never seen Braveheart either, so I was like, right, sit down. You need an education in films.
Oh, wow. I mean, I don't know how many people out there have actually can say they haven't seen Braveheart. It's kind of like Titanic. Even if you didn't like it or not, and whether you like it or not is not the question here. It's one of those films where like everyone has seen it, or at least a large chunk of it, would depending on how many VHS tapes you had at the time.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
All right, but let's get into who's in this film. The movie stars Tommy Lee Jones, the late Anne Heche, Gabby Hoffman, Don Cheadle, Jacqueline Kim, Keith David, John Corbett, and Marcello Thedford. However, there was an almost starring in this one, according to IMDb. In the role of Dr. Amy Barnes, as played by Anne Heche, Gillian Anderson from The X-Files was under consideration for this role, and I can see why they thought about Gillian Anderson.
Yeah, that probably would have worked a lot better. I mean, I'm not going to complain. Rest in peace, Anne Heche. But yeah, I think she's one of the biggest issues people have with the film. In that, I don't know, her character's just a little bit off. You don't quite know what the point of her is, and the way she's written is just a bit odd. Yeah, it's all a bit strange. But yeah, it's like the fact, she goes, she breaks the rules. She goes down into a hall with a geologist friend. Her geologist friend dies, and she tells nobody. She doesn't inform her boss. She doesn't mention it to anybody. She just looks at the sky and goes, "Oh, you'd have loved this, whatever. Rachel, you'd have loved this." So she does. She doesn't tell anybody she's dead. Doesn't inform anybody. It's like, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? It doesn't come up at the rest of the film. Is it? I'm pretty sure you mentioned that. I'm pretty sure you'd be like, yeah, my colleague's just like burned to death. I mean, it's all a bit, yeah. I don't know. Say what you will. It's strange. The
Los Angeles Geology Department, 0 days without incident. Under consideration for the role of Kelly Rourke, so Mike Rourke's daughter, as played by Gabby Hoffman, Christina Ricci was considered for this role. And again, I could see why they would consider her for it.
I don't. I mean, I suppose it would have been a bit different, wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm.
She'd probably been a bit more like a goth, I'd imagine. Possibly, maybe.
It is possible. I mean, we'll get into Gabby Hoffman in a little bit there, but I can personally see why they would consider Christina Ricci, but I do think they made the right choice here. Under consideration for the role of Norman Calder, as played by John Corbett, David Duchovny and Dermot Mulroney were both considered for this role. And I mean, I want your take on this one, because I have my thoughts on Norman Calder as the way John Corbett portrayed him. But if Duchovny or Mulroney were in this, I might be kind of looking at this a bit too much, but I just genuinely think there is clearly, an X-Files fan out there who's like, can we just get the X-Files duo in this? Like anywhere. Can we just get them in it? It kind of feels like it. Gillian Anderson on one hand and David Duchovny on the other, and you're thinking, surely there's something going on here. But oh yeah, I mean, I'm sure when they're looking at these scripts, and they probably put the the names up on the whiteboard, say, okay, who do we think for this one? Who do we think for this one? And then you sit there and look at it and go, okay, so we've just cast everyone from X-Files into this, so we can't do that. So we need to start changing our minds here. Now, apparently, in the role of Mike Rourke, as played by Tommy Lee Jones, the role was originally offered to both Ed Harris and Bill Pullman. Getting your Independence Day notes in there, but also under consideration were Bruce Willis, Patrick Swayze, and Arnold Schwarzenegger. So I don't know how you would go from Tommy Lee Jones to Arnold Schwarzenegger. The Ed
we
Harris.
Got to build a dam. I don't know how that's sorry.
We need to get LA to chill. No,
nice, love it.
I'm having Batman and Robin flashbacks again here.
I love that film. I can't help it. I'm sorry.
But considering the portrayal of Mike Rourke as done by Tommy Lee Jones, I could see why they would consider and offer the role to both Ed Harris and Bill Pullman. They kind of fit into that mold. Yeah,
like Bill Pullman. I think is it after Twist of this film? I think it is, isn't it? It's Twist of 95.
Something like that, yeah.
He makes sense. Can't believe he's gone, but he makes sense. Like that kind of character makes sense in his role. And Ed Harris as well. Obviously, he's bounced off Apollo 13, which was 95. So yeah, I can totally see that. Would have been a slightly different, maybe a bit more serious, because Tommy Lee Jones has that kind of like he's in charge. But like I want a job. I want a job in my life where I can literally just turn around and shout at people. I'd love to be in that job. Like, get me a geologist, get me a stylist, get me, like, just get me a cupcake. Like, just get me anything, I want that job.
I will say, if they had cast Bruce Willis in that role, then the building they had to knock down had to have been Nakatomi Plaza. Come to the coast, stay a while, be fun. Yeah, no. The movie is directed by Mick Jackson, who also directed Clean Slate and The Bodyguard. And at the 18th annual Razzies, this film was nominated for Worst Reckless Disregard for Human Life and Public Property and lost to Con Air. I kind of agree with that one, although I could see why this was nominated for reckless disregard for human life, and especially Anne Heche's assistant down in the tunnel.
Oh yeah, they just don't care. But I'm sorry, I've got to mention Mick Jackson, who directs this film. He also directed. I doubt many people stateside or the other side of the Atlantic will have seen this. It's called Threads. It's a 1984 British apocalyptic war drama that was produced between Britain and Australia, and it went on the BBC, and it's basically about the aftermath of a nuclear attack, and it spans like 40 years after, up till 40 years after. I think America had one that I've not seen yet called The Day After, the year before, so it's similar to that. But he directed that, and if you want to give yourself nightmares, Threads 1984. But so anyways, I had to get that in there. It's a great film.
It's funny you mention that, because I'll admit I haven't seen the film yet, but I have seen it on lists of movies that are hard to watch, and I'm just like, I'm mildly now intrigued to watch this.
It's a great film, but it is not one of those to watch if you've had a rough day. It's not a pick me up one. You don't want to watch it after a hard week at work, or you're having a rough. You don't want to watch it if you're feeling a bit down. But in terms of just following ordinary, it's set in the north of England, so people sound more like me than they do what you're used to listening to British people on television. And it's very 80s because it was filmed then, but not in a kind of over-the-top way. It's just very realistic. The bomb drops on Sheffield, and basically it follows the few survivors that there are, but it also kind of goes past all the rubbish at the time about how you can survive and this, that, and the other. And it's pretty grim. It is pretty grim. And quite, it doesn't pull its punches at all, to be honest. And I think it's sometimes you need it, because I think in films like Terminator, as good as they are, it makes, not that Terminator made a nuclear war look survivable, but it makes it look like loads of people will survive when actually a lot of people won't. Anyway, I mean, it's depressing.
Growing up in the Cold War era as well, I mean, I still remember watching the animated film When the Wind Blows, which was released in 1986.
I've actually got the comic. I've read a book of that. That was amazing.
And that's one of those ones where it's stark, right? And you sit there and you're watching this older couple, try to survive after the nuclear bomb goes. Apparently there is something wrong with Hollywood and filmmakers, because they like to make films about everyone dying.
Well, I think those like Threads and When the Wind Blows, I think they were made to show that this is not, because a lot of what the governments were doing at that time, America and Britain, only because I'm sure the countries around the world were doing, but there were, they had all this thing about civil defense, which is pretty much all gone now, but they had all this thing around civil defense, and they made it sound like the Second World War. They made it sound like, a bomb will drop, but if you do this and you follow these instructions and you use a bucket with a bit of a bin liner in it for your toilet, you'll be okay. And you're like, those films show you like, this reality, the reality would be very, very different. So I think it's interesting in that respect.
Now, big budget disaster films can make a little bit of money at the box office, but not all the time. This is one of those latter cases because the film had a budget of $90 million. Domestically, it only made $49 million and worldwide $122 million. When it was released on the April 25th, 1997 weekend, it debuted at number one with $14.5 million, just above, well, actually double, Romy and Michelle's High School Reunion, which also debuted that weekend, only made $7.5 million. So really, the path was kind of clear for Volcano to take number one, but it only lasted for 1 week at number one. Although that being said, Romy and Michelle's High School Reunion is a disaster of another kind of film. But we're not going to touch that one just yet here. But the reason why we are here, and not because we like disaster movies or because you've mentioned this film, but the critic scores. Over at Metacritic, this film has a Metascore of 55. And over at Rotten Tomatoes, the tomatometer, the critic score, is 49%, so in line with the Metascore. But the audience score is only 32%. And this is where I have to sit there and say, why? Because this is actually a decent film.
Yeah, I don't know about the other one, but I put no stock in Rotten Tomatoes. I think it's... you could argue that it's absolutely full of crap. I'm not arguing that. I'm just saying some people can, but I don't believe a word of Rotten Tomatoes. I think it's one of the worst things you can go to for any kind of score because it just, I don't trust it in the slightest.
Well, there is that story that came out where apparently some movie companies are being accused of hiring critics to give ratings on Rotten Tomatoes, whether it be in favor or not. And I'm just like, so you're paying them to do their job, but...
It's just some films you look at, and they get like the same as like the Shawshank Redemption in percentage, and you just think this is just insanity. I don't trust it in the slightest, and I think people have seen where the scores have changed, or because they essentially set the rules for because they have to figure out what a good or a bad review is. So I'm very dubious about it. I don't use it in my podcast. I never have done. I don't blame people for using it, and I wouldn't tell anybody to ignore it. But I put no stock in Rotten Tomatoes at all. I just don't. I don't even look at it. I don't bother.
I will say for this podcast, we use it as basically a qualifier as far as movies that we talk about, and then we just sit here and say that the critics were wrong. But I want to put this into perspective, though. Okay, so. When it comes to 1997 Volcano movies, Dante's Peak, of course, being the other one, the audience score on Rotten Tomatoes for Dante's Peak is a very comparable 38% in comparison to Volcano's 32%. So, obviously, people are hit or miss and more likely miss on Volcano films, but it's the critic score that really surprises me because Dante's Peak to me seems more of the as far as a disaster film goes, seems more of the film that would be more of the critical darling of the two. However, when you compare the tomatometer for Volcano, which sits at 49%, Dante's Peak tomatometer sits at 28%. And that really surprises me on this one. Like, if I'm going to ask you, which would you prefer, Volcano or Dante's Peak? Like, I'm sitting here holding two VHS tapes in my hand. You have to pick one to watch. Which one are you choosing first?
Oh, Volcano first, but only because I think you get the popcorn out of the way and then you sit down and you're in for a bit more of a serious ride with Dante's Peak.
Be curious. That's almost like the Pepsi taste challenge, right? You almost want to like put the two VHS tapes together and see how many people take one or the other. I'm now curious if someone's ever actually done that. But let's get into the breakdown of this film here. We're going to start with Tommy Lee Jones, who plays Mike Rourke. How was Tommy Lee Jones in this film for you?
Yeah, I mean, he does the standard Tommy Lee Jones thing. He takes the quips that we saw him have as, Deputy Sam Gerard in The Fugitive a few years before. He takes what we'll see him... Oh, actually, yeah, Men in Black's not the same, yeah. So he has the same kind of... Well, he's a bit more joking in this one, but he's very much... Yeah, he's probably like there would be. I don't know whether there would be this much shouting between... Because all the firefighters seem to do is shout. The chief just seems to shout at the DWP, Director of Water and Power guy, and he just shouts back until Rock comes in and shouts at them, and he's like, cut this out, type thing. And it's like, okay. So, which I don't know if it will be like that. But, he does a decent job. I think he holds the film together well. And I do like, the interplay that you get between like him over the phone, and I like the interaction between him and oh God, what the hell's his name? Can't remember his name. It's gone out of my head. Emmett, who's played by Don Cheadle. I like all that back and forth about how he's basically saying, I want to be like Mike, and I want to. He's sat on his desk and stuff. I liked all that stuff. It's good.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there are certain films that you can almost sit there and say, well, this is the template for how the roles that this actor is going to get. And when you think about the films in the 90s that Tommy Lee Jones was getting, Fugitive is the first one that comes to mind, where Tommy Lee Jones is in an authority figure and has to, yell and be the boss of how to figure things out. This really did feel like it was in his wheelhouse. But there's a moment in this film. And, as I'm watching this, it's like, okay, it's Tommy Lee Jones. It's, but then there's this moment where they're trying to figure out how they're going to divert the lava from going towards Cedars-Sinai Hospital. By the way, this film is, and I'm going to do the math here on this one, 36 years old now, I guess, getting there. No, 26 years old?
No. Yeah,
26 years old. Well, math, I didn't understand math was going to be on the test today, so clearly I failed anyways. But still, we're closing in on 30 years for this film. So if you haven't seen it by now, shame on you. That's your fault. But when they're trying to redirect the lava flow before it hits Cedars-Sinai Hospital, and there's just this moment where he's run out of ideas, and he just stops like, I don't know. And here is that kind of rare moment, that rare crack of humanity, that almost the authority shell drops from Mike Rourke. And I think Tommy Lee Jones was very good at doing that when the moment called for it. Yeah.
Yeah, he does it again earlier on, where he talks to Emmett, and he's like saying, this is what I need, I need this, I need that, which is exactly what you need in that situation. And then he says, Kelly's at Cedars-Sinai. And then he drops out of his professional part, and he talks to Emmett like he's his friend, and he says, she got burned, Emmett. And he has a pause of like, oh, God damn it. And then he goes again right back into his work. So that was the moment I thought you were going to pick, but I agree. But it is a very similar moment in that part where you think, oh, yeah, there is actually a guy underneath all this, rather than just this guy running about going, I need this, I need that.
That's the thing. Mike Rourke is not a superhero, right? He's not the guy that's going to do the everything himself. This isn't some self-aggrandizing, I'm going to stop, stand in the middle of the street and, redirect the lava myself with my mind. No, he's directing a team. He's trying to come up with ideas on the fly, and occasionally he draws a blank, or occasionally he has to stop and remind himself that there are real human things going on rather than just dealing with the actual tragedy. It's a smarter script, I think, than a lot of people are going to give this credit for, at least when it comes to the writing of Mike Rourke.
Yeah, I'd say so. Although he does take an awful lot of personal calls, I've got to be honest. I mean, he takes a lot of personal calls. I don't think I'd get away with that at work. It's like every other call, he's like, this street's on fire. Where is Kelly? Why isn't she with the babysitter? And it's like, okay, it's just... And then you get, obviously, the other guy trying to ring him, who's just forever swearing down the phone. The chief or whoever he is.
But, shout out to the flip phones in this film, because it's making me remember the old Motorola Crazers and stuff like that. But yeah, no, it's 1997. It's almost 30 years old. We're talking some old technology. It's not the brick phone that they used to have. He's got a flip phone. It's okay. Anne Hesh, who played Dr. Amy Barnes. I'm not going to lie, I actually kind of liked her in this role, but how was Anne Hesh for you in this role?
I mean, she does what she can. She does what she can with it. I think they kind of have a bouncing in and out of it. Although, I'm sorry, I mentioned this on my own podcast, but I've got to mention it again because it still rankles. She's a geologist. She's very clever. She's confident. She stands in front of the press all day. Why on earth, when she's looking for Mike Rourke's daughter, and I get she's a bit desperate, but why does she climb on top of a news truck and scream at a crowd of about 3,000 people? Kelly Rourke! Kelly Rourke! It's like, yeah, she's not going to hear you. You're wasting your time.
Mm-hmm.
That was a bit daft. That was a bit silly. But no, I'm just poking fun. But no, I mean, she was okay. She was all right. I never really bought the whole romance thing they were trying to set up, to be honest. But you know, it is what it is. But I did like the kind of the way she is with the, you know, because there's, especially when at the beginning when they're trying to decide what to do, you get Stan, best cadre in it. Rest in peace, Stan. You get him from the, is it MTN Metro Rail or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
You get her from the geologist. You get Mickey Rourke, obviously, who was from OEM, the Office of Emergency Management. And they're all there. They're all trying to figure out, the DWP guy, and they're all arguing about like, what we should do. And we can't do this, we can't do that. I like the sarcasm between everybody, and I like that she fires it back as well. I like that, and I like that they didn't go down the route of, like, she just holds her own. And like, I mean, she does kind of mention it when she mentions about like it. When she's like, oh, it's too hot, it's too dangerous for you, little honey, go home type thing. She just mentioned it once, but you know, she holds her own, which I quite liked. But yeah, I mean, but tell your friend not to stand or kneel over a bloody big crack in the concrete. It's like, come on, like what were you thinking? But no, she does a good job. To be fair, she does all right.
Yeah. I mean, I do like the confidence that she gave Dr. Amy Barnes in certain moments, right? Coming in to deal with the press, because that's a known commodity for her. And especially when you see, you know, how Lori Latham, who played Rachel, definitely does not want to talk to the press. You know, this is the kind of role that Dr. Barnes is.
Yeah, I love that line. I love that line where she's like, I'm going to throw up. And the guy's like, yeah, that's not the kind of message we want to put out there.
So those moments really work well. And the thing too is that when Dr. Barnes is actually doing geologist stuff, you know, I get that's probably not the technical term, but I'm just going to use it anyway. Geologist stuff, right? The mechanics of what her career is, you know, that's where the confidence comes in. You know, she's going to check the temperature of this dirt pile that's kind of probably holding back a ton of magma. You know, thinking about the ley lines, thinking about the topography of LA and what the flow would be and that kind of stuff. This is where Dr. Amy Barnes is, you know, in her comfort zone. But there's those moments, and you mentioned it too, when, you know, she's trying to find Mike's daughter. This is not part of the geologist's job. This is not part of her comfort zone. So I do see why it kind of makes sense, where it's like, okay, I know how to track earthquakes and all this kind of stuff. I don't know how to find a person in a mass crowd of fleeing humanity and kind of lost in those moments.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I do like the fact that she says, you know, she portrays what scientists are like quite well, in that she says the line, she says, I'm a scientist, certain's a big word. Mm-hmm. And it is, no scientist is ever going to tell you, yes, this is 100% safe, yes, this is 100% because there's always that one tiny little chance that one person, you know, won't react like everybody else, you know. So, not talking about anything in particular, but so it's something that they don't do. They can't do it. They can never say, you know, well, the sky's never going to turn green, because there's a minute possibility through all this ridiculousness it might turn green. Who knows? You know, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned too the quote unquote romance between the two, you know, as things are developing. I like the fact that it didn't end with one of those, you know, typical cinematic Hollywood kisses in the middle of the devastation kind of thing. The movie didn't call for that, and I'm glad that they didn't try to shoehorn that in. And the moments between the two of them where they're, you know, you think that something, you know, if they survive this, might happen down the road. Those moments also coincide when Mike is having his human moments, you know, when he's, begging her to find his daughter, right? These are very human moments. This isn't her being attracted to authority. This is her understanding the need for Mike to be able to put aside the authority in order to be able to deal with what's important to him and his family. So I can see why those moments are very, very small and not overt. And it's not like they try to shoehorn in lead co-star romance. I think that part at least was handled well.
Yeah, I'd say so. And I think, like, just after the meeting, Rachel's like, "So you like him?" Okay, she's not that 90s teenager, but she's like, "Oh, so you like him then?" And she's like, "Well, he's okay." And I like that, because that's probably how most people would be. I think very few times do you meet somebody and you're just like, "Oh my God, my future lies with them." So I did like that kind of realistic way of going about it.
Well, especially for a scientist too, they're going to sit there and not exactly, certainty is not a word that they like, right? So she's not certain she likes him. So I kind of get that. Don Cheadle, playing Emmett Reese. So Mike Rourke's basically his number 2. Again, another fun role here, but Don Cheadle for you.
I will call him number 2. Sorry. Sorry, I couldn't. When you said number 2, I was thinking
number 2 works for Mike.
Yeah. So Don Cheadle's good. I like the whole back and forth. Like, I know the actor's face, but I can't remember his name. When the other guy one of the other guys in the control place says to him, "Oh, I like that hat," or something, and he says, "Oh yeah, that's funny. Your wife rolled over and said the same thing to me this morning," and I just, I liked the way he is. He's clearly very capable. Like, Mike's clearly come from Louisiana, wherever he's come from, and he's the new, head of OEM, and he's meant to be on vacation / holiday, as we know it over here. And he comes back in because the earthquakes and everything are getting pretty bad, and Emmett's there, and I hadn't realised this in the first time. I don't know why I noticed it the first time, because I've seen this film a lot. But the first time you meet Emmett, he's got his feet up on, like, Rourke's actual desk. So I was like, okay, that's a bit funny. But yeah, he's pretty cool, and he clearly pulls together a lot of what he needs to. Because I've always been interested in when you get disaster scenarios, those people who are there going, "We need this, 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 and this. I don't want any BS. That's what we need. Get it now." Like, oh well, because as it says at the beginning in the little intertitle, it says, the Office of Emergency Management, it can basically just take anything it wants in the city in the state of emergency. Which, I just thought that was interesting. Good character.
Mm-hmm. The thing I like about Emmett Reese is that it's not an adversarial relationship, right? Obviously, Emmett eventually is going to want Mike's job, right? And it's not like they're playing, that Mike is, this close to retirement, too old for the pull the lethal weapon kind of thing. They work well together, and obviously it's a relationship built on communal respect, knowing that the other is, each of them are both very confident in their job, and the fact that Mike can tease Emmett about wanting his job means that he's going to get the job. But the thing is too, like, there's these moments where Emmett is without Mike and he's in the control room, and he's cracking. He has a sense of levity about him, but it almost feels like that levity is a defense mechanism for dealing with the chaos that's going on around him.
Yeah, I mean, you get that kind of dark humor. I mean, I'm not, nor have I been, but it's like people in the military and things like that. Or people in emergency services, they have dark humor because they see horrific things, and you've got to deal with it somewhere. The whole, if you didn't laugh, you'd cry. Mm-hmm. So I think that helps, because also, and you could argue it calms people. If you're there being proficient in your job and saying, this is what we need this, that, and that, but at the same time, you've got the wherewithal to crack a bit of a joke and try and calm people down, and people look up to you, because when Rourke's not there, he's in command of that whole room. And he's the department, and he's basically saying, "We need this." And if the others in that room can look up to him and be like, "Yeah, things are really, there's fires, there's lava, there's crashes, there's all sorts," but yeah, look at him, like, he's getting on with it. he's keeping calm. He's also cracking like the odd joke. Don't get me wrong, he's not up there with a squeaky clown nose or anything ridiculous like that. But it would probably calm people. It'd calm me down if I was in that situation to think, right, well, if he's keeping calm, then I'm keeping calm, I suppose, is how I'd look at it.
Yeah, and it's not like he's cracking like Eddie Murphy type jokes. You know, it's proper for the moment levity. John Corbett, who plays Norman Calder, the husband of the nurse who was working in triage here. I found this fascinating because even though, we'd mentioned that Dermot Mulroney and David Duchovny were up for this role, I always equate John Corbett with the movie My Big Fat Greek Wedding, which is so not Volcano. But it's one of those things where it's an unassuming role, and I have my thoughts on it, but John Corbett for you.
Oh, I mean, he does. He plays it well in the small screen time he gets. But, Norman is just a complete, to use an Americanism, douche. He is, I want you treating tennis elbow, not gunshot wounds. It's like, get out of here. You make me sick. He turns up and he's like, Jane, you've done enough. It's like, she's a doctor, you absolute buffoon. There's clearly a major disaster going on. She's not just going to go, okay, Norman, I'll come home and put your feet in water and give you a massage. It's just not the kind of woman she is. So, and I like the fact she just doesn't even answer him. She's like, I am answering you, like, get out of here type thing. I just think, just get out of here, you do my head in. I mean, who takes their partner to a big office building and go like, this is where I want you to live and that's where I want you to work. I mean, it's like, this isn't Sleeping with the Enemy, Norman. Just calm yourself down. Like, what, she's clearly a very independent person. Like, what are you doing? And yes, I know people, it's Volcano, and you probably think, God, you need to calm down like this. But, like, genuinely, just, he's such an unlikable character. And it's like, what? Why? I don't know. He's just in that long line of, like, 1990s characters that are just there to be just douches, basically, I think.
Yeah. I mean, Dr. J. Calder is played by Jacqueline Kim. She got actually a decent amount of screen time, given that she's the embodiment of the triage that's going on at Cedars-Sinai. And Norman, while has those brief introductory moments, we don't really get too much of Norman. So unfortunately, it's one of the situations where we know he's not the best person, but we don't spend enough time on him for me to really care that she just told him to F off without saying F off, right? You have to, if you're going to have a side story with people in a disaster film, you have to give them the space for me to care what happens to them. And while I think we got that with Dr. J. Calder, we didn't get enough with Norman for me to really, be invested in him being given the shaft.
Yeah, I do think he doesn't need to be there. I think a few of the characters just don't need to be there. Like, the film would not be harmed by not having them there.
Yeah.
To be honest.
It's almost like he's there to emphasize how good a person Dr. J. Calder is. And since we're talking about her, let's talk about Jacqueline Kim in that role. I actually really liked her in this.
Yeah. I mean, the whole scene where, the fire truck, the fire appliance gets hit by a big flaming rock that flies out of the Liberator tar pits. That's a great practical effect, by the way. Like that scene where the engine just like tips, and that's a good scene, very action packed. Mm-hmm. But then you get the scene where she's treating the firefighters on essentially the pavement or sidewalk or whatever you want to call it, and she's there treating them in the middle of the road, the middle of the street, and obviously Rourke runs over and is like, "Don't touch them," he's exactly right. Don't touch them because you make it worse. And she's like, "No, I'm a doctor." Blah blah blah. Although I don't get why. Oh, mind you, I don't know where the pages were, but like she says, "Oh, here's my page number, here's my card and my details," and then they don't. Oh no, they do. They ignore me. They do find her, and she's like, "Oh, she's in the." Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, in the Hard Rock. Yeah.
Yeah. Chasing after the little kid. Yeah. Little devil. It's Where was I going with that? Yeah, she's okay. I mean, yeah, she's good. I think people are decent in this, but I think there's too many side characters in it that you just don't need. I mean, I don't know if we're going to come to it yet, but you do not need the police officers with the resident guy. Like, what's all that going on? Like, what's all that? Like, I know it's topical at the times about, you know, the police and communities and certain communities, you know, not trusting the police and vice versa. I get that, but why is it in here? Like, because I don't get political on my podcast, so I'll try not to on this. But all I mean by this is that if you're going to tell it that story and you really want to delve into it, go for it, but don't skim over the top to just have it in there for no reason. Like, it's completely pointless. It's completely pointless. And I just think that's completely. Just get rid of it. Get rid of it. Give us more time with Raw. Give us more time with Anne Heche's character, because I feel she doesn't get enough. She just feels like she follows him around, and, you know. Although a few times she just go off on her own and figure stuff out, which I quite like. But you just think, just get rid of her. I don't need her. I want more of the policewoman from the beginning, who's like, "How about I tow your ass?" I want more of her. That's what I want. I don't want more. I don't want, you know, I don't want Norman, and I don't want the resident and the cops. I don't get that, because it felt like it had been crowbarred in. Like, somebody in the room was like, "Oh, by the way, we are setting this in, you know, Los Angeles in the early 90s or the mid 90s. So can we throw a little bit of how do I put it? Can we throw a bit of antagonism in there between, like, the police and that? We're not going to do it. It's completely pointless, superfluous, shallow. It's not needed. Well, I'm not saying it's not needed, but the way they do it makes it just a non-entity. What did you bother doing it for? It's not funny. It's not. It just is no reason for it to be there. It annoys me a little bit, but yeah, but. Yeah, sorry, I went completely off on one there.
Oh, it's okay. It's okay. This actually was part of my notes when it came to Marcella Thetford, who did play Kevin. But I will say, just getting back to Jacqueline Kim for a second here, Dr. J. Calder, she's one of the key side stories I think I would definitely keep, because, you know, when it comes to a situation, especially for a disaster in the middle of a major metropolitan center like Los Angeles, and with the lava making its way towards Cedar Sinai, that part makes sense. I liken her portrayal of Dr. J. Calder similar to Cella Ward, who of course played the nurse / wife in The Day After Tomorrow. And how she was staying behind in the hospital to look after the one patient there, as the cold was kind of coming in there.
I just don't buy that whole. I don't buy that whole. Whole premise is absolutely horrendous. Oh, it really is.
Oh, I mean,
it's like, what? He's the only kid, the only person in that entire hospital who can't be moved. Like, there's no ICU, there's no intensive care unit, there's no, like, really? Like, he's the only one? And, like, all the power's gone, but you haven't frozen to death. And, like, it's just, oh, no, I'm not. Anyway, so it just makes me laugh. I love the film, but it's just like, no, come on. I'm cleverer than this.
Right.
More clever than this.
I mean, you do have to suspend a ton of disbelief with some of these movies here. But at least Dr. J. Calder's role, I completely get. But you brought the whole antagonism between Kevin and, like, the racist cop. And, you know, I don't want to get too political. I'm completely with you on that. You know, we try to stay just on the movie itself and the performances in the film. But I do understand why they try to shoehorn this angle in there, because you're not that far removed from the Rodney King incident. And I think there's a line in this film that doesn't necessarily have to deal with that side story, but it tells us why they felt they needed to put something like that in there. And it's after the building has been knocked down and the lava flow is redirected and everyone's cheering and whatever. And Keith David, the police officer, Lieutenant Ed Fox, is holding the kid that was saved from, by Kelly and Mike. And, he's saying, like, do you recognize your parents? And he's like, yeah, my parents look like everyone looks the same. And it's that line that says that there's an underlying story here that in moments of tragedy and destruction and, life-threatening peril from Mother Nature, humanity is supposed to all be on the same side and it's supposed to all work together. And so this little kid's observation that everyone looks the same because they're all covered in volcanic ash, which, is there's actually a term for getting volcanic ash in your lungs. It's pneumono ultramicroscopic silicovolcaniciosis, which is one of the longest words I know, and I still remember that from being taught that in grade school. But it's one of those things where, and you saw this too, and I hate to bring this up, but just some of the visuals that you saw on 9/11 with everyone covered in dust from the towers, and everyone did look the same. So I understand why they tried to shoehorn it in, but I do agree that from a storytelling perspective, there were a few too many side plots in this.
I don't disagree with the idea. I don't disagree with the message. It's because it's like the message of original Star Trek, which I love, which is we'll get past this. We'll get past a lot of these issues that we have. We'll get past this. We're better than this. We can do better. But it's not preachy about it. The way they do it in this, it's just so... apologies, you probably won't understand what this means. It's so cack-handed.
Mm-hmm.
Cack is a British word for crap, basically. Doody, that kind of thing, right? I don't think I've ever said that word before in my life. I've been watching a lot of Scrubs recently.
That's okay. On this side of the ocean, we'll probably say it's ham-handed.
Yeah, but it's just cack-handed. It's really ham-fisted. It's done in such a way where it's like, really didn't need that, and it's so obvious. The guy called, I think he calls the cop Mark Furman, who's one of the cops that was obviously involved with the whole O.J. Simpson trial and everything like that. And he says, "I'm going to be the Volcano version of Rodney King," and it's like, if you're gonna have this in it, at least do it properly. It feels so out of place. It feels so out of place in a film like Volcano, because it's not that serious a film. So when the film's got things happening in it, and then all of a sudden a basketball rolling down the street, and oh my god, the floor's going to turn. It's like, right, I'll go with you. And then the next minute, it's trying to have this really serious message. It's like, yeah, this isn't matching up. And I think I'm not having a go at the writers, but there was a way you could have done it. But I don't know. I don't think it needs to be there. But I get why it is there, because for the time, and I do understand why it's there. But I think it feels like an afterthought. It feels like they kind of went, oh, by the way, can we crowbar a bit of this in? It's like you didn't need it. But anyway, not to get all serious, it's Volcano, but you know what I mean? It's Volcano.
Right. I mean, let's be honest, this film is about as subtle as a volcano in the middle of Los Angeles. So, we're grading on a curve when it comes to subtlety here. However, there is a crime committed in this film, and that is a criminal underuse of one Mr. Keith David, who plays Lieutenant Ed Fox in this. I mean, I personally love Keith David. I think he has a phenomenal voice. I think he has a great presence. Even in movies and shows that aren't the best movies and shows, anytime Keith David pops up, I'm like, okay, I'm in, I'm sold, I'm good. But speaking of, side plots and side characters that don't necessarily, or it's just a little too much and it's just completely glossed over because there's not enough space to tell those stories. This feels like a criminal underusage of Keith David.
Yeah, I'd agree completely.
And then we have someone who's not underused, Gabby Hoffman playing Kelly Rourke. Now, you had mentioned that you can't really see Christina Ricci being considered for this, but how was Gabby Hoffman in the role for you?
Right. I don't know how old she's meant to be, because at the beginning, she's talking about getting her nose pierced, which I presume even in America, no offense, you've got to be at least 16 for that, right? I don't know the rules. And then you have her acting like she's as soon as they leave the house, she starts acting like she's 8. He's clutching a teddy, doesn't know what to do. Don't get me wrong, it's going a bit mad around her, admittedly, but I don't know. I don't understand. It felt like, and again, I'm doing it again. I'm guessing. I'm making assumptions. But on a podcast, it's what we do, right? I didn't make the film. I wasn't there. I wasn't old enough to do it. But for me, it's like, it feels like she started off, and I don't know this. I've not read it anywhere, and I have done the trivia for this before, for my own. It feels like she was meant to be a much younger kid. And then for whatever reason, they were like, oh, no, we want to make her older. But then they didn't work that back into the script. I know it feels like I'm nitpicking with the film. It's just little nitpicks. I do enjoy it, but it's a podcast, so you know people surely want us to discuss it, right? But it is very much like what, like I don't know. Her characterization is a bit off. She does a decent job, does a good job, but it's I don't get why she stands and looks at the big lava thing for ages. It's like, move away from it. It's like, it's clearly quite hot. Like, move away from it. But no, just stand there and let it burn you.
Right.
But that's the only time that it does that as well. You never see the lava bombs do that to anybody else. So very convenient for the story.
Yeah. I mean, I will say that her portrayal of Kelly in this reminded me more a little bit of Natalie Portman in 1995's Heat. As far as
I've not seen Heat yet.
Oh,
I know.
you missed a good one.
I know. Sorry, go on.
That's okay.
Just in case you said a spoiler, I've just heard it's amazing, and I don't.
It is a phenomenal film. It is paced very purposefully, I will say, and very well for its purpose. But Natalie Portman's portrayal as the daughter in that, as Al Pacino's daughter, reminds me a little bit of Kelly Rourke. But I think there's something really good about Kelly in this, and let me explain. So you have clearly it feels like a divorced parent kind of situation with the wife kind of, ripping on Mike for leaving her at home with a babysitter during all of this kind of thing. And that she is ridiculously, she has anxiety when it comes to disasters and earthquakes and whatnot. And when you realize what Mike does for a living, heading up the Office of Emergency Management, you have to think that all of the work that he probably brings at home and all the times he gets called into work is because bad things happen, like earthquakes, like fires, like anything that could possibly happen in California. So all of his work.
Why do they live there?
I don't know. I really don't know, right? It's like the weather's nice, sure. The ground occasionally rumbles, but the weather's nice, But
yeah, swings and roundabouts, I suppose.
Right, but when you think about it, all his work conversations and all of his work that he brings home centers around what could absolutely positively be the worst case scenario that could happen in the city that they live in, So, and if something were to happen, he would have to jump into action to be able to take care of it rather than take care of her. So I can understand the anxiety that Kelly would have in dealing with in the face of danger. So someone who freezes up in that moment probably stems from the idea that her father, by the very nature of his job, could not be there for her in those moments. So there's a very smart use of anxiety in Kelly for that. And then the fact that it's not her dad that helps her develop the courage and the responsibility level of looking after these kids in the Hard Rock, the fact that that comes from Dr. J. Calder as opposed to her father, that makes sense too, because more often than not, kids will write, when they say, well, who's your inspiration? Who inspired you to do this? More often than not, most kids are not going to say, well, my parents, right? It's going to be someone who they look up to outside of the family unit. So in this moment of tragedy, and Dr. Calder is, very assertive and calm and in control of everything that's happening, and she's helping people right in front of her. This is where she's pulling her strength from as opposed to from her father. And I think that makes sense as well. So while at times you may sit there and say, well, yeah, you should put Christina Ricci in, or you could have put Natalie Portman in, I think Gabby Hoffman did very well. And I think Kelly is scripted smartly for someone who I agree with you. I think she's probably about 16, but she's a 16-year-old with earthquake anxiety issues, I think.
Yeah. And to be fair, though, I mean, I do gather they've just moved there, so maybe she's not used to the quakes and things, because don't they mention he's come from, I don't think they do jokes, I can't remember where he's from, but aren't they saying he's from Louisiana or somewhere? He's come from somewhere else, hasn't he? Outside of the whole LA basin, I presume. I might be getting my geography's not great for America, but I presume he's come from somewhere else. So maybe she's getting used to like living there, and we don't know whether she lives with her dad full time or with her mum full time. I don't think the script writers knew, to be honest. I don't think anyone cared. But yeah, I mean, I think she maybe that's part of the issue as well. I've no doubt if you drop me in LA and let me live there, I would probably cack myself, because I've never touched once a mini quake, but I've never experienced an earthquake, so I wouldn't know. I'd be completely lost. Yeah,
no, I mean, if they came from Louisiana, then you're probably taking a look at, okay, so we went from hurricanes to earthquakes, so not an upgrade? Just thinking, just better weather, maybe?
Yeah, God, I don't know how you people, I don't know how Americans do it. I really don't. I really don't.
Well, and there's the thing, too. You have to think that if someone is being moved to take over the Office of Emergency Management in a city like Los Angeles that has a lot of emergencies to manage, you have to, the character would probably come from a city that has enough problems of their own. And Louisiana, in dealing with hurricanes that come up from the Gulf of Mexico, you would think that would qualify someone to be able to handle a city like Los Angeles. Before we get to our MVPs, though, social media has spoken out. The Time Shifters and Orphaned Entertainment podcasts over on Spoutable chimed in with, if the Asylum Studios found a bag of money, they'd make something like this. If I recall, several studios had their own Volcano movie at around the same time. Yes, Dante's Peak. I've only watched it once, but I recall the ending being a bit ridiculous. Traffic barriers to stop the lava, right? So, yeah, I can kind of see that. But also, the Movie Duel podcast chimed in with, one of only 2 films I've fallen asleep to in the cinema. Some interesting parts, but it's ultimately so far out there, it's almost an asylum film with Hollywood money. And, I mean, obviously, we're talking about 1997 here. And the fact that both of these podcasts, by the way, thank you to both of you guys for chiming in on this here. They both reference the asylum. And, of course, the asylum... we love the asylum over here. The very first episode we did was on an asylum film, Mega Shark versus Giant Octopus. But they kind of, they live in that disaster film kind of, mode for a lot of the times when they're not doing mockbusters. And I get this is 1997 and we're not dealing with the level of CGI technology or compositing or whatever that we're used to today. Like, obviously, Volcano's not going to end up looking like 2012 just because film technology has advanced so much. But going back and watching this, it does at times feel like an asylum disaster film, but we're talking about 26 years later down the road. So I will ask you, does Volcano hold up today?
I think it does. I think they built a mass. I think the CGI holds up pretty well. They used a lot of practical effects. They built a massive set in a warehouse of basically downtown LA and burned it. I think, it's not perfect. I think to compare it to the asylum, even for me, and if you've listened so far, you'll know I'm not exactly forgiving. No, I'm joking. I can nitpick with the best of them, right? I think to compare this to the asylum, I've not had the pleasure of either of those podcasts, and feel free to reach out, but you're being incredibly harsh, in my opinion. It's not, you're not going to put this up there with the best scripts of all time, but to compare it to an asylum, I mean, dear God, have you watched some of those? They are absolutely shocking. I mean, they've got a charm to them for sure, but, a certain charm. But, I mean, to compare them to that is, that's incredibly harsh.
I mean, I think if you're taking a look at the lava effects, again, 26 years removed from the release of the film, then yes, if you're comparing those lava effects to today's movie standards, you could sit there and say it might look like an asylum film. But I don't know,
have you seen the effects in The Flash? Seriously? Like, I mean, there's been some pretty bad stuff lately. So,
I don't disagree on that one.
You know?
But, I mean, if you're going to compare it to a film like Jurassic Park, don't, right? If you're going to compare it to, even a movie like the Day After Tomorrow, which I think visually was actually quite well done, that's probably not the way to go either. But I do think that, graphically and CGI wise, I think some of it doesn't hold up, but you have to remind yourself that it's a 26-year-old film. And I think in a situation like this, like if you go back and watch Earthquake, and I love Earthquake, I think it's a great film. A lot of it doesn't hold up. And a lot of those disaster movies don't hold up because you're dealing with the film technology at the time. But I remember watching this film when it came out and watching it over and over and over again on VHS. And I still find it to be, and I'm going to say this, to me, it is the better of the two 1997 Volcano films. I prefer this over Dante's Peak. And, the fact that if that's the case, then it definitely holds up. And I mean, yes, I do like an asylum film, for all of its cheesiness. And the graphics and the CGI in those films definitely are a calling card, if you will. But I agree. It's not asylum level for the time that it was made, but it may look like that with the gift of hindsight. But it has come time. So, Sean, who is your MVP of Volcano?
Oh, it's got to be Stan. It's got to be Stan. It just has to be. His death is iconic. I like him all the way through. I would have taken a film just following Stan. That's what I want. I want a remake that follows Stan's journey through this. I think it was great. Yeah, that's my MVP.
And that's the thing too, is that this is one of the things that I have to question. By the way, Stan Albert, played by John Carroll Lynch, he melts in the lava, and I will admit, like, this is where Volcano and Dante's Peak have those moments of self-sacrifice in diving into the lava to save other people,
or an acid lake. Yeah,
exactly. And that, since we're talking about this, I mentioned there was one part of Dante's Peak that I would sit there and just skip past because it's so cringe. That moment where the grandmother jumps into the acid lake and helps push the boat to shore, and I'm just like, oh my god, this is so bad acting.
To be fair, right, they didn't need to be in that situation. If the grandma had have listened to Linda Hamilton earlier and gone down the bloody mountain volcano,
right,
away from it, she'd have been. They wouldn't have been in that situation. The kids raced back up to get grandma. Oh, she sacrificed herself. Yeah, fair play to her, but she didn't need to be up there. She should have left.
Right.
I'm just saying.
Damn it, Grandma, listen for once, will you?
I know. Yeah. Get down the damn hill.
Right, but in this instance, Stan, his sacrifice makes sense. He's there to try to save as many people as he can, and it's him and the subway driver, right? And he knows he can't make that jump. He tries as best as he can, and I don't know if. Obviously, no one's going to really know for real if this would happen or not. But if you jumped into, an ankle's deep worth of lava, are you going to melt down into it? And yes, there's the suspension of disbelief, but it is a decent moment. But the thing is, that's where that side story ends. Right there. We don't see those people afterwards. We don't see everyone else afterwards. It's a nice little bookend on that part. And you are going to have those moments in disaster films where there's, for lack of a better term, side quests. Stan basically got the death scene.
But for every Stan, you get a guy like the news reporter who just sits in his car, describes what's happening. Firefighters, they get burned alive, and he's like, oh my god, they're burned alive. And it's a bit like the Hindenburg. It's quite good. And then all of a sudden, he's still sat in his car, and then the lava's coming down the street and the firefighters are getting dragged off the road, and he's like, get them out of there, drag them in off the road. It's like, why don't you get your backside out of your car and actually help? Like, I know you're a reporter, but there's got to be a point where it's like, yeah, I should probably step in and help. Right, I can walk. I'm not injured. It's like, come on. And then, the whole bus thing and the ladder. Why do they shoot so many bullets at the tires? It could only two bullets. That'll do. Why do we have like a tire firing squad with the? I don't get that. You've got more chance of it ricocheting back, but yeah, I don't know what are we gonna do.
Those got to be some really, really good tires on the LA buses. But since you mentioned the reporters, for my dear Canadian listeners here, this movie is the cinematic debut of one Miss Jillian Barberie. And if you watched Fox Sports on NFL broadcasts, like, back in the, probably like 10 years or so ago, she was the woman who was the weather and anchor for your Fox Sports broadcasts on Football Sunday. She also started her career at the Weather Network here in Canada. So if you ever wonder where Jillian Barberie got her movie start, it's here in Volcano as a reporter. But getting to my MVP, I tossed this one up. I was initially thinking Anne Heche, but I really have to go.
Really? Sorry.
The thing is, I actually like her in this film. I can understand why they put her in this, but in the end, my MVP is Don Cheadle. I think there's something about Emmett that brings the appropriate level of levity to the situation without it being jokes for joke's sake. I think it humanizes Mike more than anybody else in this film, and it shows there's this moment where he's in the control room and he's on the phone with Mike and he's having problems hearing it, and he just tells everyone to shut up, and everyone else stops immediately. And that in itself goes to show how important Emmett is in the department as much as Mike is. Don Cheadle played this very, very well. And it's no wonder that he's now gone on to, do so well in the MCU. So Don Cheadle is my MVP for this film. Sean, thank you so much for helping me go back down Volcano Road and giving me an opportunity to wax philosophic about this movie. Before we go, please let our listeners know where they can find you and the Review It Yourself podcast.
Thank you for having me on. One last bit of trivia for myself. Sorry, I did try and squeeze this in. You had a bit of trivia about the newsreaders. I've got a bit of trivia about a British newsreader. You see him talking, say, oh, they've the British guy, obviously. They're like, oh, they've had this massive win over Mother Nature. That's a newsreader who's an actual newsreader as well, but he's also in Shaun of the Dead. He's the newsreader who says, removing the head or destroying the brain. So there you go. And he's an actual newsreader as well. So just in case you wondered where you'd seen him from, that's it. Which I missed when I did my own episode, so I had to get it in there. But no, thank you. God, I hate this bit. I absolutely hate. My name, I'm Sean. I'm from the Review It Yourself podcast. No politics, no pandering, no point. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. Hopefully, feel free to jump over and have a listen. If you want to, start with the episode we did, the pirate movie. Seems a good place to start. Please do not go to the first episode. Nobody, no podcaster alive wants you to go to their first episode. Not a single one. But yeah, I say what I think. I hope you enjoy it. But I've always got a reason for what I say. And I just thank you for having me back. For having me on, really.
And Sean, there's an open mic for you on the show whenever you wish. And by the way, if you want to actually listen to that episode of Review It Yourself where we talked about the pirate movie, you can find Review It Yourself wherever you get your podcast. But you can also find that specific episode link on our guest appearances page on notthatbadcast.com. Sean, thank you so much. And to our listeners, thank you for listening to this episode. Now, you guys know the drill. If there is a movie out there that you think is unfairly maligned or is so bad that there's no way in LA that we can find anything good to say about it, hit us up on social media at NotThatBadcast or go to our website at notthatbadcast.com. And while you're there, check out our other shows, There Can Only Be One and Keep Watch Pass, or You can also go to our Coming Soon page and see some of the movies that we are working on episodes for. Drop us a line. We'd love to hear from you guys. Sean, thank you so much. Listeners, you guys are awesome. This is It's Not That Bad. I'm Jason. Take care.
Hey folks, Stefan Shirazi and Renee Richardson here from the Metallica Report.
And we are proud members of the Pantheon podcast family, where the best of music and podcasts unite.
We've got something pretty cool for you. We're giving away an exclusive Metallica merch package worth over $250.
That's a whole lot of Scary Guys, Skulls, M72, and other sought-after Metallica swag. And we've made it easy for you to win. Follow and share the Metallica Report, and you're in the game. Go to pantheonpodcast.com/Metallica, enter your email, and hit that button to be entered to win.
And just like that, you're eligible for our monthly exclusive Metallica merch package.
And guess what, rockers? You can enter every month, so just do it. And while we love our global brothers and sisters, the lawyers won't let us ship outside the U.S.